What if the greatest threat to an empire wasn't a foreign army or a rising rebellion, but the deepest, most private shame of its king? Imagine Spain in the early 19th century, a vast, crumbling empire ruled by a man history would remember as both El Deseado, the desired one, and the cruelest tyrant of his age, King Ferdinand VII. His reign was marked by terror, betrayal, and the agonizing demise of 3 queens. Yet the darkest secret of his power lay not in the council chambers or the battlefield, but within the locked doors of the royal bedchamber. This is the story of how generations of reckless royal inbreeding culminated in a singular, devastating anatomical abnormality, a physical curse that fueled a psychological tyranny. It is a haunting reflection on how intimate failure can metastasize into national catastrophe. We must look beyond the official histories, into the secret medical reports and the hushed whispers of the Madrid palace, to uncover the tragic price paid by every life touched by Ferdinand's dark, deforming power. Ferdinand was born into a genetically poisoned lineage, the product of countless cousin-to-cousin royal marriages among the Habsburgs and Bourbons, designed to consolidate power but resulting in predictable decay. He emerged from this biological lottery in 1784, a living symbol of royal decline. While his youth was spent observing his weak father and his mother's scandalous, politically destructive affairs, it was his developing physical condition that truly warped his character and defined his destiny. As he grew, court physicians began to observe an anomaly that defied all conventional medical understanding. Whispers spread of a grotesque disproportion, an anatomical challenge so severe it rendered normal intimate relations nearly impossible. The psychological impact on the young prince was crushing. In an era where physical refinement was paramount, Ferdinand's condition marked him as a freak, fostering a deep, festering shame that curdled into suspicion and vindictive cruelty. This humiliation taught him an early lesson in power, that he could compensate for the weakness he felt about his body by brutally exercising authority over others. Servants who accidentally glimpsed his naked form or courtiers who dared to mock him found themselves instantly facing ruin, exile, or worse. The prince was forging himself into a tyrant, using his growing sadism to test the limits of his absolute authority, convinced that the world saw him only as an object of ridicule. When Ferdinand took his first wife, the beautiful and innocent Princess Maria Antonia of Naples and Sicily in 1802, the full devastating stakes of his condition became chillingly clear. The wedding night, meticulously planned by royal physicians with specialized cushions and custom aids, was not a celebration, but a traumatic medical procedure. Maria Antonia, confronted by the horrifying reality of her husband's affliction, reacted with revulsion and terror, a response Ferdinand interpreted as the ultimate betrayal. The failure of the first marriage was profound and lasting, setting a template for tragedy that would haunt Ferdinand's life and Spain's future. Maria Antonia retreated into crippling psychological trauma and addiction, her body and mind destroyed by repeated encounters that were likened to surgical ordeals. Twice the queen became pregnant, offering fleeting hope, but both pregnancies ended in devastating miscarriages, attributed by physicians to the extraordinary physical and psychological stresses placed upon her. Ferdinand, incapable of empathy, interpreted his wife's suffering and the loss of their children not as a medical tragedy, but as deliberate sabotage. His paranoia intensified, leading him to implement increasingly bizarre and controlling measures, including ordering the creation of special leather and silk restraints to keep Maria Antonia compliant during their mandated attempts at procreation. When she died in 1807 at age 21, broken by despair and abuse, Ferdinand's primary emotion was relief, immediately seeking a new, more compliant wife. His subsequent political rise, marked by betrayal, cowardice during Napoleon's invasion, and ultimately his restoration to the throne in 1814, did nothing to temper his inner darkness. The vast crowds that greeted him with flowers and tears upon his return, hailing him as El Deseado, were oblivious that the king's first priority was not governing his devastated nation, but commissioning a new set of sophisticated marital aids from craftsmen across Europe. The second wife, Maria Isabel of Portugal, suffered the same fate. Despite all precautions, the wedding night was a disaster of such magnitude that it left the young queen with severe trauma responses and a persistent fearful stutter. Ferdinand's sexual dysfunction had fully metastasized into a political psychosis, leading him to believe Maria Isabel was conspiring with foreign powers to mock his affliction. His obsession with an heir pushed their intimacy into a grotesque laboratory of sexual experimentation, observed by foreign anatomists, who reduced the royal bed to a spectacle of human misery. The ominous decade of Ferdinand's restored rule was not just politically tyrannical, it was defined by the king's frantic, desperate attempts to secure his succession. After Maria Isabel succumbed to nervous exhaustion, likely suicide or self-harm in 1818, Ferdinand searched for a third wife, Maria Joseph Amalia of Saxony, who attempted to approach the marriage with clinical detachment. She treated their encounters as a medical challenge, meticulously documenting the required surgical procedures. Even this detached approach failed to solve the fundamental impossibility of his condition. The king's anxiety and sexual failure had by now become synonymous with Spain's decline. American colonies cited his inability to produce a legitimate heir as divine evidence against Bourbon rule. Ferdinand responded with brutal purges and paranoid terror, installing peepholes, commissioning elaborate spy networks, and draining the treasury on security measures instead of national needs. In 1829, a supposed miracle occurred. Maria Joseph became pregnant. The hope was short-lived. She suffered a traumatic premature labor and died alongside her daughter 3 weeks later. Ferdinand, consumed by madness and despair, refused to allow the bodies to be buried for nearly a week, demanding his physicians perform impossible resurrections. He was trapped, surrounded by the death masks of his 3 sacrificed wives and the ghost of his intimate failures. The final, macabre climax arrived in 1829. His advisors, desperate for stability, arranged a 4th marriage to Maria Cristina of Naples. In a final humiliating deception, Ferdinand accepted her as his wife, knowing she was visibly pregnant by another man. The subsequent birth of Isabella II in 1830 secured the line, but at the cost of the king's final shred of dignity. His remaining years were spent consumed by the paranoia of maintaining this great political lie, subjecting Maria Cristina to constant surveillance and demanding humiliating medical checks. Convinced she was still plotting his ruin, Ferdinand VII finally died in 1833, a victim of physical and psychological exhaustion. His private tragedy had become the kingdom's downfall. The secret autopsy, conducted by the physicians who had studied him for decades, confirmed the grotesque reality of his anatomical curse, a condition exacerbated by years of the king's own pathetic attempts at self-modification. The preserved organ, along with detailed medical reports, was sealed away in the Vatican archives, deemed too disturbing and politically dangerous for history to acknowledge. The story of Ferdinand VII is a terrifying lesson in the true cost of absolute, unchecked power wielded by a profoundly damaged individual. His reign demonstrated how a king's deepest personal shame can metastasize into national trauma, ruining wives, terrorizing subjects, and accelerating the collapse of a global empire. Spain's decline was in many ways the collateral damage of one man's futile, desperate battle against his own biology. The tragedy of Ferdinand's 3 dead wives, his politically compromised heir, and his ruined kingdom serves as a grim monument. He was both the perpetrator and the ultimate victim of a system that allowed the intimate pathology of a single ruler to determine the fate of millions. The silent record of his anatomical legacy, hidden from the world, remains a haunting testament to the destructive power of shame and the corruption that festers when power knows no bounds. His name is preserved not for greatness, but as a chilling cautionary tale, the desired one who brought nothing but suffering, a man whose cursed body cast the longest, darkest shadow over the history of Spain. If you found this story thought-provoking, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more historical insights like this one.